So the title of this video might seem a little strange. What am I talking about? When I say, woke culture and infertility. Well, it's exactly what it sounds like, actually. I'm going to talk about how there's a difference between, like, the political affiliations in your ideology and how that affects how many children you're going to have. And this is a very important topic, actually. This has a lot of implications. I don't think a lot of people realize that there is a difference. If one group of people has more kids than another, that is huge, and that does have implications. So first, let's look at the left, the Democratic Party. So I'm just stating facts. It's not going to be like judgmental or anything. I'm just stating facts. Like this is how it really is. So you have so on the Democrats, let's go for the more let's go for the extremist, the small minority extreme group. So you have the LGBT people. They're going to be voting Democrat, right? Okay. Now, how many children do these people have? Essentially zero. LGBT, essentially zero. Sometimes maybe they were married before they became LGBT, or they were LGBT and they were kind of hiding it and they had kids. But okay, those are generally exceptions. In general, the birth rate of this group of people is essentially zero. They will die out. So, so LGBT. So their ideologies, they are not going to be able to pass them on to their children. Their ideology, it's gone. They can pass it on so vertically. They're not going to be able to pass it on. They can pass it on horizontally. They can pass it along to other people, their ideologies, but their ideologies are not going to be passed on to their children. So their ideologies will kind of like sort of die with them. And then you have the majority of the Democratic Party, which are just people that are generally not very religious, more likely to be atheist, educated. That's great. I'm all for education. But generally, people in the Democratic Party, they're not going to have as many kids, especially birth rates have been plummeting. But the Democratic Party, people that kind of lean the left, they generally will probably not have as many kids. Because of life goals, and it's just not a priority. And that's fine. I don't have any kids, so I would be hypocritical to say like, oh, you're not, like, why are you not having kids, what's wrong with you, are you selfish, like, I'm not going to be saying any of that, but I'm just stating facts, like, and that's fine. Some people just decide not to have kids, but those are the facts. So people on the Democratic side, the left, they're not having as many kids as the conservatives. Now let's compare here. So people that are more traditional vote conservative, Republican. So I'm talking about America, but I do believe these ideas probably apply to other countries as well. So people that are a little more traditional, religious, they tend to have more kids. Well, why do you think there's so many Mormons in America? They've existed for 200 years, and if they're having 4 or 5 kids a family, even if you aren't really recruiting that many people into your belief system, you're going to have a lot of people because you have a lot of children. So that's why I think that's one of the reasons why Christianity is so powerful. If you have giant families, they're going to expand very quickly, and so religious people generally have more kids. And this isn't just Christians or Catholics. I mean, this is true for Muslims too. Religious people in general have more children. This is global. This is global. This is not just America. So you can go around. So people that kind of go more towards a traditional like family structure, they're going to have more kids, and so their ideology is going to be more powerful. So when you have more children, your ideologies can pass on. Because that's generally the way you're raised. That is generally how you're going to think. Like, you can change your belief system later, your ideologies, but you are going to be very influenced by how you're raised. So when you have these giant families, those ideologies are going to be stronger. So even though we are, you're going to have this influence. We are having all this, LGBT trans stuff, all these, very in the media. It's all over the place now. It sounds like it's very powerful, and it is hurting our country. it's a minority group. And those ideologies will eventually die out and it'll be weaker. The people on the traditional side, they have more children. They're going to pass on their beliefs. It's going to grow. Like, why do you think there's so many? Like I said, there's so many Mormons. There's a lot of Muslims in the world. Believe it or not, there's a lot of Muslims because they have huge families. So guess what's going to happen in Europe? They have some of the worst birth rates in the world. Europe. So what do you think is going to happen in Europe in the future if they're having one kid a family and the Muslims move to Europe and they're having 5 kids a family? It is not going to take very long for their culture to assimilate Europe. You're going to have huge upheaval. Like, this is serious. Like, when you have more kids, your belief system will pass on because like, people kind of think in their own little scope. Their own lifetime. They're not thinking future. You can have huge changes. If you have a minority group in your country, but that minority group has a much higher birth rate than you, they will grow in size proportional to you. I mean, that should just be obvious. So this is what's going to happen. Like, these are just the facts. So now I believe that. I mean, I believe the rapture is going to happen. Maybe during my lifetime. That'd be cool. Now, if Jesus tarries and there is no rapture in the near future, in the next 10, 20 years, and this goes on, we're still here, nothing's happened, no tribulation, another 50, 100 years. Eventually, we're going to probably flip-flop. We might go back to having, the country be a little more traditional, less of this, left, kind of start leaning more towards the right because that's just the mathematics. That's just population dynamics at work here. You're good. It's going to happen, and there's always cultural shifts. Eventually, there might be another great awakening. Of course, this is in the future. This is if Jesus doesn't come back, during my lifetime, and we continue living. This is something that could happen. We could go, we could have this, flip flop and go back to being more traditional. So yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention is. It's kind of strange that although I did say that the conservative traditional people, and they're not necessarily always like religious, but generally people that vote Republican are more likely to be religious, and that does affect it. They have a much higher birth rate, so it's going to they're going to overrun the Democrats. But in our country, in America, we're about 50-50. If you look at like voting. It's about 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. It's like literally evenly split down the middle, like literally 50-50. And so how is that possible? If you think about it, like the Republicans, the conservative people, religious people, are generally going to have more children. So why is it 50-50 then? Well, that's because this people on the left. They're not passing their ideologies to their children. I mean, they are, but they don't have as many children as the people on the right. So what they're doing is they're stealing people on their side. They're taking the children from the people born into the religious families. That's what's happening. And if you go around talking to people and you go witnessing to people, telling them about Jesus Christ, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people, young people, that grew up in a Christian family or some kind of religious family. And they just went away from that. There's tons of them. They're everywhere. So this is what happens: is that the left is stealing the children from this conservative, from the people from the more traditional families. And yeah, it sounds enticing. The left. Free. We're free. Free love. Don't be like those boring traditional conservative religious people. Don't be like that. Be free. So it's a very enticing message, and a lot of people fall for that, and they leave church, and they get taken up with they start leaning more left, become more radicalized, get angry at God, whatever. Everybody has their own personal trauma, and they have their own personal trauma, and maybe they have some legitimate reasons why, but generally this what ends up happening is that's why it's more like 50-50. It's because the young people. It's because people get stolen from the people from the conservative, the traditional family. Some of their children get stolen by the left, and that's what ends up being a 50-50 balance, because the left's message is more enticing, and Satan's gonna be very charismatic. And it's gonna sound like a good deal, and because the traditional people, they're boring, So that's pretty much why we end up in that situation. So anyway, so in the long term, Jesus doesn't come back. We might flip flop. Like, I'm serious. I'm just looking at the data. We might actually flip flop and go back to being a little more traditional in this country and possibly around the world, because that's generally how it is. If one direction pushes too far in one direction, like the LGBT people, they crossed the line that they shouldn't have. They went too far. The left demanded way too much. If there's going to be pushback, people are going to get disgusted by it, and it's going to go the other direction. And then when the people get too traditional and conservative, and they get too far in that direction, too legalistic, there's going to be a pushback. That's why you have the hippies. That's why. So when people go too far in one direction, there's going to be a counter movement, because people do not like these extremes, and then it goes. It's going to keep flip flopping back and forth, because that's just how people are. They gravitate towards extremes. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. I'll see you next time.